Welcome back, 5th and 6th grade, to week 3 of the New Testament stories you've probably never heard of. Before we jump in, I want you to take 60 seconds and share around your small group what's a rule that you purposely don't follow. Now, the last few weeks, we've been talking about New Testament stories that you've likely never heard of. In week 1, we talked about Philip teleporting. In week 2, we talked about Paul riding the first surfboard. And something we're talking about today is really quite fishy. So take out your Bibles, pause the video, and turn to Matthew chapter 16. You're going to read verses 24 through 27. We'll pick back up when you're done. Now, there are two really big takeaways that we find in this passage. Number one, Jesus is the true king. You see, this story is kind of confusing, so let's break it down a little bit. There is this thing called a temple tax, and a temple tax is really a tax that is paid to keep the temple clean and in working order so that people can use it. It's kind of like when we pay a tithe to the church. That keeps the lights on, that keeps the building clean, that keeps everything running. And it was expected that everyone who is a male over the age of 20 pay this tax each and every year. And so Jesus asks Peter this confusing question. Do kings pay their own people or the people that they have conquered? And Peter says that they tax the people that they have conquered. And then Jesus says, well, then the citizens are free. What does that mean? You see, Jesus wanted Peter to understand that Peter was God's son. And the temple tax was for God's house. And so why would God's own son have to pay a tax to the temple that is meant to be a house for God? Why would Jesus, who is God's son, pay a tax to his own father? You see, Jesus was king of the Jews, and the king shouldn't have to pay a tax. And in fact, Jesus says that the people are free, and his people are free. And that those people, his people, God's people, shouldn't have to be forced to pay a tax. Number 2, true leaders set examples of what is good. And so even though Jesus says his people shouldn't have to pay this temple tax, he does tell Peter, we don't want to offend them, so go to the lake, go fishing, and the first fish that you catch will help pay the taxes for both of us. What? So Peter goes fishing, finds this fish, and opens its mouth and finds enough money for the taxes. And so Jesus pays the taxes with a fish. Jesus shouldn't have had to pay the taxes, but he sets an example for Peter and does it anyway. And what that means is that even if you are a leader, you still have to follow the rules. And so leaders, really good leaders, lead by example. There's a person that comes to mind when I think about leaders leading by example, and his name is Ryan Gernand. Ryan was my program manager when I was on staff at a summer camp. So he was in charge of the whole thing. There were about 20 of the rest of us who were staff members under him. But Ryan was one of the best leaders I've ever met. He was such a servant leader. He spent the whole day running around, putting out fires, problem-solving things so that the rest of us could do our jobs and do it well. No job was too small for Ryan. Nothing was beneath him, whether it was plunging toilets or raking stuff at the beach or picking up trash or having big, important conversations. There was no job too big or too small for Ryan. He led by example, and in doing so, it created a culture where the rest of us spent the day serving each other and helping out as well. So even if you are a leader, it's really important to follow the rules, to set good examples for others. You see, Jesus provided this miracle through the fish in order to make that point to Peter. And if you look at the passage, when the guys asked Peter if they had paid the tax, he initially lies to them and runs away. He knew that he was above paying it, and he also knew how poor he was, so he lies and he runs away. But Jesus sets this example that even though he himself is the Son of God and the temple tax is being paid to his own Father in God, that even though he was maybe above the temple tax, he was still going to set an example, and he still showed Peter the way. And in doing so, he set this example of leadership where we as leaders need to set a good example, follow the rules as everyone else, and serve others along the way. I hope you have a good time in small groups talking more about how to lead by example.